Top Democrats are grappling with their Michigan and Florida problem, and there's no consensus yet as to whether the party's decision to strip those states of their delegates should stand. Let's bring in our senior political analyst, Bill Schneider. He's watching the story for us. So, Bill, could a fight over seating the Michigan and Florida delegates be damaging for either candidate?
Well, it could be damaging for both candidates and for the Democratic Party. Each candidate's interests are clear. Hillary Clinton wants the Michigan and Florida delegations seated at the Democratic Convention because most of them will vote for her. She won both contests.
I think that the people of Michigan and Florida spoke in a very convincing way.
Barack Obama doesn't want them seated because their votes could cost him the nomination.
Those decisions would be made after the nomination, not before.
But the clash of interests is turning into a clash of principles. Principle number one, rules are rules. No delegates, no campaign.
None of us have campaigned there, so people have no idea what the respective candidates stand for.
Principle number two, nearly 2.3 million people voted. Their votes should count.
The people of Michigan and Florida apparently didn't abide by the rules because they came out and voted. They wanted their votes and their voices to be heard, and I think they should count.
The Democratic National Committee has floated the idea of organizing caucuses to select delegates.
If there is a way of organizing something in those states where both Senator Clinton and I can compete, and we have enough time to make our case before the voters there, I think that would be fine with me.
Unfair, say Clinton's supporters.
You can't undo an election where 1.7 million Florida Democrats have gone to vote in a secret ballot and replace it with a caucus that maybe 50,000 people would show up.
Another clash of principles and interests. You see, Obama has won 12 out of 13 caucuses. He'd be very happy to see Michigan and Florida organize caucuses to choose their delegates. Interests can be compromised. Principles cannot. And that's why the fight over seating the Michigan and Florida delegates is getting very tough. Wolf?
This is a serious problem for the Democrats.
The superdelegates that I talk to are uncomfortable with the notion that they would override decisions made by voters.
So will those party leaders and activists follow Obama's cue? As the nominee, they're feeling pressure to do the right thing. But what exactly is the right thing for these superdelegates to do? Joining us now in our strategy session, the Democratic strategist, Stephanie Cutter, and the Republican strategist, Rich Galen. What is the right thing, Stephanie, for these so-called superdelegates to do? Vote their conscience, vote for their constituents in their respective states, go with the majority nationwide? A lot of questions.
A lot of questions, but a couple of things, Will. First of all, the race isn't over yet. We've got several contests to go. Coming out of these contests, we're likely to have a candidate with more pledged delegates than not. These superdelegates were never meant to represent their congressional district or their state. They're really kind of delegates at large, which means they're voting on behalf of the party and the country. So it really does come down to their conscience and where they believe the will of the people are.
So it's certainly true, Rich, that there's no legal obligation for them to vote one way or another, but what's the political obligation on them, if not the moral obligation?
I'm not sure about a moral obligation. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Ted Kennedy is a superdelegate. I mean, and nobody thinks that he's going to suddenly vote for Barack Obama, nor should he. This is
no, for Hillary Clinton.
For Hillary Clinton, exactly right. The White House, or the Clintons, I mean, trotted out Lanny Davis, a friend of all of ours, I think, the other day, to start the drumbeat for the fact that superdelegates are, by culture and history in the Democratic Party, free to vote for whomever they want. He mentioned Franklin Roosevelt and Adlai Stevenson and John Kennedy as the fact that the Democratic Party insiders have more often than not chosen the right person. So they're laying down the groundwork for the superdelegates to move this convention to Hillary's column.
What Obama doesn't dispute is his desire to win the backing of civil rights icon and Georgia Democratic Congressman John Lewis, who has now dumped Clinton and may follow the will of voters in his district and cast his superdelegate vote at the convention for Obama.
I think increasingly the superdelegates that I talk to are uncomfortable with the notion that they would override decisions made by voters.
And yet, Obama wants to keep the support of superdelegates like Edward Kennedy and John Kerry of Massachusetts and Arizona Governor Janet Napolitano, even though voters in both states heavily backed Clinton.
Michigan originally had 366 delegates between them, more than enough to sway this very tight race.
Press. Bill, let me start with you with the first question.
Okay.
Is there any way for the Democrats to settle this that doesn't end up in a fistfight?
No, somebody's not going to be happy. But I just got to say, you know what? I'm glad we're having this fist fight because this proves that having Iowa and New Hampshire always first is not going to work. And they tried to fix it this year, and they just made it worse. As long as they leave Iowa and New Hampshire in that prime spot where they don't belong, we're always going to have problems like this. My own feeling is let them count the delegates. They voted. People came out to vote. Count the delegates. I don't care.
Count the delegates.
Count the delegates.
Let's listen to what Hillary Clinton said about this, what her argument is about why these people should be counted.
Obviously, the people of Florida thought this counted. And I have said that I will do everything I can, if I'm the nominee, to make sure that the Florida delegates are seated. Because I want people in Florida to feel empowered and part of this process.
But, Bill, here's the thing that I don't get about this. How can you have a vote in a state where everybody's not running and not campaigning, and the state has been told you won't count, and then come back? You know what that's like? That's like having a warm-up for a baseball game, and then 7 innings in when you're behind saying, I want to count the home runs from the warm-up.
I know. Mark and I agree on one thing. I mean, there's no perfect solution here. I mean, there is no easy solution here either. But, you know, these people in Florida, they thought it counted. They came out in record.
They knew what the rules were. They knew it actually didn't count. They were told it would not count.
But they still came out in record numbers because they're so excited about this. And by the way, Barack Obama was on the ballot in Florida. Now, he took his name off the ballot in Michigan. I think
yeah, everybody did except for her almost.
Exactly. Their dumb mistake. I think she showed a little savvy judgment there.
I want to quickly let us hear from what Barack Obama had to say about this very same issue, just like we did Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm. It certainly wouldn't be fair to allocate voters or allocate delegates based on a non-campaign. We did not campaign in those states. So there may be ways that we can manage this, having a caucus, for example, in either of those states that gives both of us an opportunity to compete for delegates.
Bill, it seems to me that this is the fundamental issue for a lot of voters. The question of fairness. It may be unfair to keep them out, but there seems to be no fair way to bring them in. Doesn't this do just a lot of damage to the Democratic Party, no matter how they settle this?
Well, Democrats will work this out. Don't worry. I'm not worried about that in the long run. But at the risk of knocking the halo off of Saint Barack Obama's head, he wants to keep the rules in Florida and Michigan, but he wants to change the rules for the superdelegates. Which is the next big question. There are almost 800 of those. And so he's saying that those people ought to vote for the person who wins the most popular votes and has the most delegates and wins the most states. So he wants to keep the rules in one place and change them in the other. You can't have it both ways.
Of picking a president for the Democratic Party, I've never seen such intense interest as we're seeing across our country. And I think it's fair to say, based on our recent experience, that Florida will once again be a battleground state.
Senator Barack Obama's campaign also says it disagrees with the National Committee's ruling and says whomever the nominee is will fight to get Florida's delegates involved in the convention.